Well, hey there, this is Danny Sunshine Bauer, host of the number one downloaded podcast for school leaders, Better Schools, and the School Leadership Series. I help school administrators fight isolation and frustration via a leadership community in order to gain clarity and find solutions to their greatest challenges. This session is titled Live and Lead at Your Best. And part of what I do for myself is invest in education constantly so I can sharpen my skill set in order to maximize the value that I bring to the listeners of the show and members of the mastermind and other clients. One of the investments I've made in myself was taking the virtual conference, the World Business Executive Coaching Summit, also known as WBEX. In this session, Live and Lead at Your Best, I learned all the content from Scott Eblin in the 2018 session. So I adapted it here for the purposes of working with school leaders, small business owners, and other executives. And thank you for investing in this program as well. I know that you're going to get a lot of value through the video and the teaching, and then there's the application as well. It will transform your life if you execute, I guarantee it. So as a leader, you may or may not know this, but you're a weatherman or a weatherwoman. Okay, you probably got into leadership and wanted to make a big impact. Maybe you thought about, a huge concept like legacy, and you wanted to make a change, right? But here's the thing, you absolutely control the weather because how you show up, right? Your presence totally matters. How you show up impacts the climate of your organization or the weather of your organization. Now, when I was a school principal, I had the hallway problem. And I would get so wrapped up with the things that I needed to complete throughout the day that it was possible I would walk from point A to point B and not engage with a lot of my staff. Well, the problem with that is I would go back to my office and focus on the work that I needed to do. And the work was extremely important. But by neglecting the relationships and not being cognizant of what was going on externally and internally, right? People would stop by the office. They'd send me emails. They'd start texting, hey, Danny, are you okay? You seem mad or you seem upset and blah, blah, blah. And the funny thing is, I was totally fine, right? I was completely okay, but I didn't engage with people in the hallway. So maybe you can relate to that. Now, the thing here is that is an example of unhealthy personal presence. And really that falls into three categories for the purposes of this session, which would be number one, you doubt how you contribute. So if I had an unhealthy personal presence right now, creating this video for you, or I've taught this live, I've run it with one-on-one clients as well, I would start, doubting that this is valuable, that I have the skills necessary or the intelligence, the education, whatever, to bring value to you. And I might play small as a result, right? Maybe I'm running some type of meeting, a presentation, the inner critic starts going, you have the imposter syndrome, and you just start doubting yourself in terms of what you contribute. Another thing that is an issue is running in the red. So this is a great metaphor, in terms of a car. And we'll use a couple car metaphors throughout this session. But if you hit the gas pedal too much and accelerate too hard for too long, your RPMs go up, right? And your engine can't handle it. You could actually cause major damage to the inner workings of your vehicle if you keep it going in the red for too long. You need to be able to shift down, right? You can't always be go, go, go. If you are, there is destruction that's imminent. It's around the corner. If it hasn't happened yet, it will. I guarantee it. And you see a lot of leaders that fall from grace and their stories get caught up in the media. And people are like, how did this ever happen? Well, a lot of times it's because they're running in the red too much. And then another thing is they're isolated as leaders. They're not connected to a community that could call them on their stuff, right? And hold them to a higher standard. The third thing in terms of an unhealthy personal presence has to do with your communication. And when it serves you best, or when it serves just a portion of your audience, right? The people you are presenting to, it's one size fit all. Your message isn't going to land with everybody, all your stakeholders like it needs to. That's a problem, and that's an unhealthy personal presence. When you design things that are just easier for you, as opposed to what people will enjoy, what they'll consume, what will hit home. And as a leader, listen, the biggest part of the job might be casting the vision, communicating, right? And so if you just do one size fit all, you're really leaving a lot of chips on the table, so to speak. So let's contrast that with a healthy personal presence, which is a lot about what we're talking, and considering today. And it's the opposite of the three things that we just talked about now. So instead of the doubt, you have confidence. Look at these guys, right? Any man that can wear those beautiful scarves or a vibrant coat and just an incredible hat. I love that hat. If you know where that hat was made and can send me one, I would totally rock that, right? And that's a healthy personal presence. You think these guys show up in their organization and for a meeting and they're doubting how they contribute? Heck no, not just like that, you know? They're dressed in a very creative and just wonderful and handsome way. They have confidence. If they go out on a date or if they're out with their wife, you know, if they're not married, that type of thing, these guys do not lack confidence and they have a healthy personal presence. Similarly, you know, instead of running in the red, you can see that this lady is just taking a nice stroll in some beautiful weather, and she's maybe connected here spiritually. You know, she looks relaxed. She looks confident as well. And so when we pause and we make room in our schedule for things that fill us up, right? Then we are in a healthy personal presence. Talking about filling ourselves up, you know, there's another metaphor that I like to use, which is just a cup, right? And when the cup is full, then, or even overflowing, you can give out of that cup. You have an abundance of energy or connection, emotion, you know, whatever it is that you want to talk about that's in that cup. Now, if that cup is empty or close to empty, you don't have a lot to give. But leaders, you know, leadership is service. Leadership is generosity. It's giving. And so you need to regularly renew your battery, recharge it, and renew your energy in order to give. And so that's a healthy personal presence. A little side note too, you know, this title, the sessions, Live and Lead at Your Best. You can't lead, right? As a leader, you want to have major impact. Well, you can't lead at your best unless you're living at your best. That is a foundation of what we're talking about today. And so this session is all about how do we make sure we're living our best. Then that transfers over into our leadership. And finally, the third part of a healthy personal presence is that it's outside of you. It's not just focused on you. It's not just focused on one, you know, group of people in the audience or whatever. It's focused on everybody, all the stakeholders, all the different personalities, all the different ways that they receive messages. Maybe you use a personal assessment like the DISC profile, and you understand, you know, all the different people that are in the audience. And so you can craft a message that hits home. There's a new person that I picked up as a client for my podcasting business, and she is a high D. So it's shortened to the point. Just give her the details, right? If I'm approaching with more of a high I in like the relational part, right? In the telling stories. And that's who I am. So you could tell I'm a storyteller. Like that would drive her nuts. And she would think I'm long-winded and get to the point. If you're a high D and you bought this video, you know, or invested in this session and then the worksheet, you're probably like, all right, Danny, cut to the chase. But you know me at this point through the podcast and that kind of thing. And you know I'm a storyteller. Finally, so to wrap that up, if you're audience focused, thinking about everybody, you have a healthy personal presence. So now we're going to get to a pretty depressing part of the session, but don't worry, there is a positive ending for sure. And there is an application. I can guarantee that if you take action on it, will transform your life. So all of us have 168 hours in a week. Whether we're Elon Musk and we are trying to build these awesome cars like Teslas, or, you know, making some grand journey to the moon, a guy like that or a guy like me, just a regular old guy, we all have 168 hours within the week. Now, with that 168 hours, you see the equation minus 72. The 72 is there because the Center for Creative Leadership studied and surveyed 500 smartphone-enabled executives. Okay, so school principals, superintendents, assistant principals, so leaders at schools, small businesses, corporations, you know, whatever kind of executive you want to think. And they found that these smartphone-enabled executives are connected to their work on average, right? So there's some high and some low, but the median was 72 hours a week. Doesn't seem like a big deal, you know, less than half of the hours available within a given week, okay? But you got to take some other things away. So with taking away work, we're left with 96 hours. Still doesn't seem like such a big deal, but now let's subtract the basics. And let's take 7 days a week at 8 hours, which gives us that 56. And the basics are sleeping, eating, and grooming, okay? And so divide those 8 hours however you want. If you're going to do 7 hours for sleep, then you only have 30 minutes, right, to eat the whole day and for grooming, the shower and the shaving and everything you need to take care. So that's a very conservative estimate, right? But the 96 that's left over from the work minus the basics, now you only have 40 hours. That's 40 hours to do things like this, right? To take extra education, things that fill you up. It's 40 hours like the picture that you see, 40 hours left for family, for your friends, for yourself, for leisure activities and vacation. 40 hours even for stuff that we don't like that much, like paying the bills or house upkeep and chores. And so you could see as you climb the leadership ladder and more responsibility is given, your time is your most precious resource. And if we're not careful, that time slips away from us very quickly. And if you've found that it's really hard to find some type of balance, right? The elusive balance within your leadership life, this is why, because it doesn't exist. And the other problem is when you get to this point here, right, with the 72 hours connected to work on average, the 56 hours for basics and the 40 that's left over for everything else, that puts us in a chronic fight or flight mode, okay? And when you're in a chronic fight or flight response, some really negative things can happen to you mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So what we're looking at here is the impact of being in a chronic fight or flight response. And this has a major impact on our sympathetic nervous system. And some things increase within that range. And looking at the left of the diagram, our blood pressure increases, which leads to more heart disease. Stress hormones are going to cause increase in anxiety, irritability, insomnia, and weight gain. And if our sticky blood pellets increase, then we are more susceptible to heart attack and stroke. Another impact of being in a chronic fight or flight response is some things slow down. And when our digestive system slows down, we can get more ulcers. Our immune system slows down and we're more susceptible to infections and cancer. And when our growth and sex hormones slow down, that leads to what we see in every single president, probably around the world, but definitely in the United States. They go in looking like one man, and even just 4 years later, they've really aged, right? And that's because the growth and sex hormones have slowed everything down. But there is a solution to all this, and the solution is mindfulness. This is actually a picture of me and my beautiful wife and I got to go to Barcelona, Spain. This is out in Mount Serrat. And it's funny because I was kind of upset when she took this picture, but it's such a beautiful picture. It's kind of ironic now. But I love the picture because it looks, so peaceful and contemplative as I'm sitting there on the mountain. And there's a monastery up here. The Nazis actually came up to this mountain to look for the Holy Grail. So it's a very spiritual place, a beautiful place. And this is a contemplative picture. So the solution equals mindfulness. It's the brake system. So we talked about being in the red, right? If we keep that pedal to the metal and we're run, trying to knock out everything we need to get done and never pausing for ourselves, right? We're going to break that engine. And so the solution is slowing that down, hitting the brakes within this system. The thing is, like mindfulness, though, it doesn't have to be a spiritual thing. It can be, right? It doesn't even have to be meditation. For the purposes of this session, when I talk about mindfulness, I mean awareness, okay? An awareness of what's going on internally, what's occurring outside externally. So think about the hallway. Was completely oblivious, to everybody and what was going on with them. That was low emotional intelligence and low empathy during those moments. And it's also connected to our intentions. So again, mindfulness, for the definition of the session, is an awareness of what's going on externally and internally, plus the intentions that we have. And that's really important because, again, leaders control the weather. How you show up, right, with whatever kind of energy you bring to your organization, that's going to impact the climate, right? That's going to impact your people and impact everything. And here is another image. This graphic is about mapping your weather system. So if you look at the top right quadrant, we have high positive energy. And some words and ideas that would describe, people with high positive energy, that would be optimistic, motivating, willing to act, and inspirational. We could all agree that leaders with high positive energy, that's a very good characteristic to have. Then there's a low positive energy too, which isn't bad either. That's when you're relaxed, thoughtful, and friendly. So that was the bottom right quadrant. The opposite, right? Is that kitty corner? So the top left quadrant, high negative energy. This is tense, anger, irritated. Maybe if you have like a righteous anger, sometimes this is not bad to have as a leader. You don't want to be yelling constantly. That would be a bad thing, okay? But if the stakes were incredibly high, right? Maybe there was a major emergency that was life or death. At that point, you might want to demonstrate some type of righteous anger, okay, to protect people. But overall, negative energy is a bad thing. Now, low negative energy, that's never good to have. Okay, these are ideas like disappointment, apologetic, withdrawn, disengaged. So we don't want that stuff at all. Okay, here's where I'm going to pause, and we're going to go to a document, which is your worksheet, which is the application of today's session. So the work that you do, okay, and here's the thing, vision without implementation is merely hallucination. Execution is absolutely everything. So I've set the groundwork and we got through the depressing part of the session. Here's the positive part. You can do something about being in a chronic fight or flight response. And it's not that you're ever going to have balance. Forget about it. There is no balance in the leadership life, but there is rhythm and harmony. And since I love metaphors, you think about some of your favorite bands. I love the Beatles. My mom brought me up, listening to all the Beatles records. And then I got their CDs, and now I listen to them on Spotify or Apple Music, whatever. But the point is, that was one of the best bands in terms of harmonies, right? Like everybody would have a different part when they sang together, when they came together musically, with the different guitars, the bass, the drums. They had great rhythm as well. And when you have that rhythm, when you have that harmony, something beautiful is produced. So we know that as a leader, the demands and the expectations that our communities and our staffs have in terms of what we need to deliver, those are extremely high. That's not going to change. We might be able to dial it back a bit in terms of hours worked, and sometimes that's just a lack of boundaries, and they need to be, definitely created and then honored. But overall, you're going to have quite a demand on your time. So what you want to strive for is rhythm and for harmony. Okay, and so part one of this application would be you at your best. So I want you to think about how you feel when you're productive, effective, and energized. And I have those notes for you to keep in this document. And before I move on, actually, so this is a Google Doc. You can't edit it. So if you have Google yourself, click File and make a copy, or add to your drive, and then click File and make a copy. Or you can download as, like a Word document or something and then edit it. So anyways, who are you? What are you like? How do you feel when you're productive, effective, or energized? What are the 4 to 5 words that describe you at your best? And I want you to avoid at all costs things that you think you should be or any type of aspirational goals. So for example, I'm a strong leader and I have influence. I impact people for sure. But when I walk into a room, I don't have one of those strong personalities necessarily that like everybody stops and looks and like gets quiet super fast. And so if I wanted that might be an example of me at my best, but that's aspirational. It's out of my reach right now. Okay. And so that's actually not something I strive for, but it's a point that it's not me. So I want you to be realistic with 4 to 5 words that represent who you are right now, currently at your best. And so I put 5 examples right there: present, influential, connected, warm, and compassionate. So think about that. Identify yours. If you want to pause the video and do it, go ahead and do so now. Or you can always replay this video and work on this stuff in a little bit. In terms of part 2, the routines, what I want you to consider are what are the routines that are going to get you to part 1, those words when you show up at your best, right? So thinking of the domains or categories, physical, mental, relational, and spiritual, what do you need to participate in, okay, to show up at your best. So physically for me, I love to work out. So CrossFit, riding my bike. I love going for walks. That could be by myself or with my wife. I obviously enjoy being intimate with her too. And that definitely renews me and recharges me, helps me be at my best. Mentally, I might do things like meditate. I love to learn. So reading books or going to conferences and just, learning new things definitely recharges my battery. Went to a conference recently in Tennessee with the mastermind I've been a part of for years at View from the Top. And that just like freaking lights me on fire. And I come back vibrating and buzzing. And it's just incredible. All right. So that's a physical and a mental category and the routines that I have there to renew my energy. Relationally, connecting with friends, traveling. My wife and I love to travel. And I love getting random gifts for either her or my friends, my family, and for clients. And then spiritually too, reading scripture, praying, meditating, being generous, those type of things renew my energy and recharge my battery. So those are the routines that help me show up at my best. And when I do that, I can expect a number of outcomes in the domains of home, work, and community. So in terms of home, I might have greater intimacy and better understanding and communication with my wife. At work, I think of those words like impact or a big idea, big word like legacy, right? And we generate incredible creative work that really changes communities and changes lives and is important. And then finally, community. In that domain, I consider just the connection that I have with my fellow human beings, okay, and my neighbors, and this idea that we're all in this together, or maybe service as well. So those are the outcomes. So again, make sure you think about those 4 to 5 words that describe you at your best. What routines will help you get there? And if you honor those routines and participate them in regularly, and you show up at your best, what are the outcomes that we can expect? Now, let's pause here for a second. I'm going to go back to the presentation, the slides. All right, so we're back with the slides, and this equation comes from a performance coach named Tim Galway, who I believe is in Florida and is a tennis sports performance coach. But he came up with this idea that our performance, all right, our leadership performance equals our potential minus our interference. And I really love this a lot. And the thing is that we need to deal with interference. So this is the other application part of the worksheet. And so, in terms of interference, there's external things that trigger us, okay? And you see this guy, I feel like that smile, it looks fake to me. It looks disingenuine, all right? And I'll tell you, a former supervisor of mine was so fake, right? She'd show up and pretend to care like how I was doing and would do small talk literally for like 1 to 2 minutes. And would have this like fake smile. But inside, I swear to you, she was a robot, okay? And that was an external trigger for me because I knew, because of relationships, I'm good at building relationships. I knew she was out to get me, right? So my people on the inside, right, with the no, I know she was collecting information and, to be quite honest, just making stuff up to just muddy up my character and my name. All right. So that was something I had to deal with. And so when she'd show up, that would trigger me, and that would cause some things to happen on the inside, right? So on the inside, there'd be this inner monologue going on. So the external trigger was the boss showing up. And then internally, I might start doubting myself. Remember that unhealthy personal presence? I doubt my contributions. I doubt maybe if I was a great leader, the right fit for the community, if I had anything to offer. So this is problematic, right? I'd have that imposter syndrome that somebody else could do it better than me. And maybe I had to find something else. So the external trigger would, trigger, like I said, the inner monologue. And then what happens is inside a couple things, that low negative energy here on the left, maybe, and this did happen, I started to become more reserved and more withdrawn. my big vision, my big dreams for the school, I started to play small, right? Instead of playing big. And I became apathetic as well. Then on the right side, you see Steph Curry. And this is actually a positive thing for him. But if we can pretend that it's high negative energy, maybe you blow up like a Super Saiyan. So, shout out to any old Dragon Ball Z fans that are watching this. It's probably not very likely, but I like this video and I love Dragon Ball Z when I was younger. So, you're either going to withdraw, or you're going to, okay, let's fight, let's get at it, and you're going to blow up. But both of those aren't necessarily, they're not necessarily, they're not good responses. They're unhealthy personal presence, and it's that high negative and high or low negative energy. So it was that external trigger, right? That fakeness that would cause this inner monologue that I doubted myself. And then for me on the left, I would be more withdrawn and apathetic about the work. And some people blow up when that happens. But going back to our equation, and this is the work that I want you to do. And let me pull up that document for you again. But here, take like 30 minutes and think about for you, what are the triggers? And then what kind of inner monologue does that cause intrinsically? And when that gets too loud, when that intrinsic interference gets too loud, what happens as a result? Are you the type that withdraws? Are you the type that blows up? Are you passive aggressive? What is it that happens for you? And back to the equation, if you'll take that 30 minutes or more or whatever and consider that and then start working on it. And maybe that's with a therapist. Maybe it's with, you could be me as a one-on-one coach. It could be within the mastermind that I run. It could be within your professional learning network or business network. But the thing that I want you to do is find somebody that can hold you accountable, hold you to a higher standard, that can cheerlead you as well and encourage you. But if you could deal with that interference, right? Look at the equation now. Your performance, the sky's the limit. It equals just your potential. And I love what my friend Fran McGreevy talks about. He says, I work with gods and goddesses. When he was a principal, now he coaches them. But when he was a principal, he'd talk about his staff and say, I'm among gods and goddesses. And you better believe that his people, after 40 years of him pouring into their lives, they knew how much he loved them, right? And he saw the gold that was really inside of everybody. I don't know I think it was Michelangelo, but creating those sculptures that he did, he would say that there's a sculpture inside each block of stone, right? And it's my job to chisel away that stuff until, we can see it. And that's what you're doing when you deal with your interference, because you're taking away all that junk and garbage that's holding you back. And it's then allowing you to increase your impact and legacy and performance because it's all just equal to your potential. So in closing, I want to give you 6 tips, and it's on your worksheet as well, in terms of getting the most out of today's session. So number 1, I want you to review this weekly. And if you are the type of person that likes to print things out, maybe you carry a binder, print it out, laminate it, and put it in, that notebook or binder that you walk around with all the time. Maybe you like to print things out, put them in your office at work or at home. And so I suggest that you do those things. If you're more of a digital guy, then keep it, in your Google Drive or Evernote, Apple Notes, Google Keep, whatever you use. But I want you to look at it all the time and review this weekly, okay? So a commitment that I want you to make to yourself and to me is to review this sheet weekly. Because again, at the foundation of what we talked about today, if you live at your best, you'll lead at your best. And you think about how you want to show up, the routines that'll get you there, the outcomes you can expect, the interference that you need to deal with so that your performance will equal your potential. Tip 2 is play to your rhythm. So we talked about how balance is elusive and probably an unrealistic expectation. So I want you to play to your rhythm. I want you to create beautiful music, and don't get too upset if you're having a hard or a busy season, right? Again, going back to the boundaries, revisit your ideal week And I want you to schedule time for yourself first, actually, so that you fill yourself up so you can give to your family, to your friends, and to your staff. So get on your calendar before you put everything else, the things that are going to renew you, those routines that we talked about in part 2 of this application on the worksheet. So put those on the calendar first, then start going through your work week and your family and all the things that, the demands that are made of you, okay? And then put those on the calendar so that you create your calendar around what you need to be at your best. Tip number 3 is to get 1% better every day. So this is going to be quite a challenge, especially if you're feeling very dry right now. You're that cup and you're tapped out, or you've been running in the red for way too long. So start small. Maybe it's one of those physical routines. Maybe it's one of those mental routines, whatever it might be. Just start small, get that going, build some momentum, and then add to it, all right? That's getting 1% better every day. If you get 1% better every day, that's going to compound over time. It's like exponential growth, like compound interest, and believe me. So just build a little momentum, start small, get some early wins. Tip number 4 is visualize yourself being successful. So you better believe, like Steph Curry, he visualizes himself taking clutch free throws or game-winning, last second shots. I know athletes do this. They talk about it all the time, and they invest quite heavily, not necessarily in financial resources, but in time resources to close their eyes, to take some deep breaths and really think about what's it going to feel like taking the last second shot. How will that, and they're building muscle memory actually by visualizing. There's a really interesting study, and I don't remember who conducted it, but there were 3 groups of people, okay? There was a control group, and they all played basketball. And let's say, I don't remember if it was like let's just say for a month. But the interesting thing was, group 1 put in the most work, okay, the most hours practicing basketball. And they actually increased the most. Group number 2, they put in barely any physical hours of training, but went all in on visualization. And they were just a smidge lower in their performance than the ones that actually just did physical practice all the time. And then group 3 did nothing. Okay, they didn't practice and they didn't visualize. Obviously, their performance didn't improve at all. But the fascinating thing with that study is that just by visualizing and having a little bit of physical practice, group 2 almost met the same type of performance as those that were always putting in the reps in terms of the physical practice. And so visualization builds incredible muscle memory just by thinking about yourself being a success. So in this context of school leaders or small business owners, whatever, a lot of demands on your time. We already know that. The Center of Creative Leadership and what they said, you are running around doing a lot all the time. So I want you to visualize your day. Pull out your calendar, look at all the events that you have, and especially visualize those events at the end of the day. So maybe you have 5 meetings, and on your way to that 5th meeting, visualize that morning or that afternoon. What do you want to be like? How do you want to show up to that meeting? What kind of energy do you want to bring? What kind of impact do you want to have? And so I'm not letting you off the hook, right? I'm calling you to a higher standard of leadership. And part of the way you're going to get there is through tip number 4, visualization. Tip 5 is recruit some buddies. So again, a professional learning network, your local community, maybe it's a church, some other organization, maybe it's some type of business network. It could be the mastermind. So I'd love for you to join that. Maybe it's through a one-on-one coaching relationship, and we could do that as well. And then tip 6 is celebrate wins. So I think leaders suck at a couple things for sure, like most leaders. One would be taking time to renew their energy. And then 2 would be to celebrate things that they do well. You got to where you're at because you're a top performer. You could be even better though. You could be even better if you take time for yourself. You could be even better if you celebrated your wins. So celebration, that could look different for everybody. Maybe it's buying a book or going to a concert or some type of a dramatic performance. Maybe it's going out getting some type of treat. Who knows? But whatever that is, make sure you build in time for tip number 6, which is to celebrate your wins. So in closing, I just want to remind you that I help school administrators fight isolation and frustration via a leadership community in order to gain clarity and find solutions to their greatest challenges. And I welcome you to apply to the mastermind. It's closed right now. And at the time of this recording, I have 36 members from 7 different countries on 4 different continents, literally around the world. It is definitely the best leadership development program out there. And it's the most personalized learning you'll ever receive. I guarantee will transform your life if you want to give it a shot. So there's a wait list if you want to apply, and you can get there by betterleadersbetterschools.com/mm. And when a slot opens up, I'll give you a call and we'll set something up, interview you, and we'll make sure, you got to consider if it's a right fit for you, but I got to make sure the right people are joining as well. So that's the mastermind. And just want to say thanks. Okay. So thank you so much for investing in yourself, right? If you're living at your best, you're definitely going to lead at your best. And thank you for taking the time to invest in yourself, to invest in this video, and to knock out and execute on that worksheet. So again, vision without implementation is merely hallucination. It's all about execution. And so my last call to action would be, give yourself an hour, 2 hours to go over that worksheet, really dig deep and identify those words, everything that we've talked about. But the other part of the call to action is I want you to email me your completed worksheet. I want you to share those results with me so I can both encourage you and then hold you accountable and just keep the conversation going. So the worst type of thing is like going to a conference or investing in a course and not taking action. So make sure you take action. You deserve it. You're awesome. And remember, your performance equals your potential when you when you execute and you take care of that interference. This is Danny Sunshine Bauer. Thanks again, and bye-bye for now.